Hi guys, you guys are clearly getting the very first time that I've made one of these YouTube videos. The sound's going to be awful. I'm getting a microphone. For now, we're just going to try to swing this. So this is going to be Reagan and the end of the Cold War, as you can see there. So here's what we're talking about on this. At least for this first video, it's going to be the stories that we tell about the end of the Cold War, like what the theories say, what the parties said, that kind of thing. The second thing we're going to talk about is who was actually in the Reagan administration. Um, so the first thing that we want to talk about is like the fact that the end of the Cold War took everybody by surprise, and everyone was just trying to scramble to explain like why did the Soviet Union collapse. Nobody could figure this out. So one of the stories that was across the board, like everybody agreed on this, the realists and the liberals, was that the Soviet Union suffered an economic collapse. So let's start with the realists. The realist is going to say a couple things. Number one, the Soviet Union didn't have any money, and so they didn't have any power. When you say realism, you say power. And so the world just basically shifts from bipolarity, unipolarity, everything's different, blah, blah, blah. The liberal explanation is going to be the same idea of no money, but the issue is going to be it lost support for its alternate ideology. So communism clearly just doesn't work. Capitalism, super awesome. Everybody's going to, be a winner with capitalism. And there you go. Freedom then wins, and it's the start of this thing called the end of history, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, not in this particular day. But this idea of the end of history is this liberal idea that now democracy and capitalism have won. Fantastic. It's all done. So that is sort of the first idea about these stories about the end. Now, the political parties had different ideas about this as well, and this is where we're going to be Reagan in this a little bit. So the Republican stories about the cause of the end. Now, Reagan was a Republican, so obviously Republicans are going to have pretty good ideas. And for the Republicans, you can just think Reagan good. Reagan is an anti-communist crusader, and he also implements this aggressive economic warfare. He does the Star Wars, that SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, where he's basically going to outspend the Soviet Union. So he's going to put more money into the military, more money into weapons, more money into stuff like that. The Soviet Union has to put money in to keep up. It can't keep up because it doesn't have the money, so they're done. For the liberals, though, for the Democrats, the stories about the end is Reagan is either bad or ineffective. So Republicans, Reagan good, Democrats, Reagan bad, or Reagan not matter. So the Soviet Union would have collapsed. Eddie Howe is what they say. And Reagan's policies, what they end up doing is he spends so much money that essentially the United States goes into deficit, which just causes all sorts of problems then after that. So either damaging in the sense that he just spent, or ineffective in the sense that it doesn't matter what he did, the Soviet Union would have collapsed anyways. And so we get this idea about imperial overstretch, which is the idea that empires just tend to grow. The United States was an empire, and it just grows and grows and grows until it just spends so much that it collapses in on itself. So it creates this enormous unneeded U.S. debt that we really still have today, the deficit. So the question becomes, what did Reagan really do? What did Reagan really want? So one more thing before we sort of take a break here and you watch something else that's not me and my voice, is we want to look at who was in Reagan's administration. So there's going to be two groups, two camps basically inside the administration. There's the hardliners and there's the pragmatists. So the hardliners are going to be neoconservatives. Now remember what neoconservatism is. It's that liberalism, but with a different sort of twist to it than, say, the international liberalism. So again, think about what liberalism is. Think about all the things that neoconservatism is, and what might they say about the Soviet Union. So you got these guys in the Reagan administration who are hardliner neocons. What would they want? So obviously, the first thing, communism. What would they say about communism? It should be ended, not contained. So it's not about, again, the realist idea of containing communism. No, it needs to be gotten rid of. It's evil, it sucks, it's got to go. Who's going to lead the charge? the United States. So the United States has to outcompete the Soviet Union economically. And it's those things I just talked about that the Republicans say were great and the Democrats say were not so great. Economic sanctions make it real tough for the Soviet Union to do business. And then defensive arms race where we're just going to spend. And the argument goes the United States had a lot more money. They have deeper pockets, and so they're able to spend more. In a spending race, the United States is going to win. So doing things like Strategic Defense Initiative, this sort of, this plan to be able to shoot missiles out of the sky, that's going to take a lot of money in terms of research and development, a lot of money in terms of testing, and the United States is making the argument, or again, the hardliners are making the argument that they're going to have more money to spend. The key proponents of this, if you look around at the Defense Department, they're going to love this, obviously. Defense arms race, that's more money coming into the military right there. NSA, which is the National Security Advisor, the CIA, and then the Secretary of State, a guy named Haig. Now, let me just tell you a quick story about Haig. This is great. So, it's completely off the topic, but who cares? So Haig is the Secretary of State, and he and so really early in the Reagan presidency, there's an assassination attempt on Reagan, and he's shot. And people think he's going to die, blah blah blah. He's taken to a hospital, and nobody really knows what's going on at this point. So, there's a lot of kind of panic in the country about this whole thing. And Haig, who's the Secretary of State, he goes on TV and he says exactly what it says right there. As of now, I am in control here at the White House. Trying to restore order, all that kind of stuff. Well, obviously, if the president goes down, the Secretary of State doesn't step up. It's the vice president. And it's just a hot mess. And everybody's just kind of like going like, hey, you're crazy, making fun of him, all that kind of stuff. And he finally has to sort of step down. But he was a big proponent of this hardliner. And a lot of the people, again, if you picture the people sitting around the table, the Defense Department, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all these guys, NSA, CIA, Haig, they're all sitting around the table. These guys are the neocons. All right. The second group are the pragmatists, and these are defensive realists. So again, think about what a defensive realist would want in a situation like the 1980s. Communism, bad. But instability, way worse. So if the Soviet Union goes away, for the hardliners, hooray. For the pragmatists, I don't know what comes next. It could be very unstable. It could be actually more dangerous than having the Soviet Union there. So the Soviet collapse would make a world that's way more dangerous. And here's why. Here's the reasoning behind this. If it collapses overnight, sure, but nobody thinks it's going to collapse overnight. If the Soviet Union collapses, it's going to be a gradual decline. And as it starts to gradually decline, it has an incentive to launch a preemptive strike before it collapses. Before things sort of fall, the bottom falls out, there's always going to be this sort of incentive for it to attack the United States first. So if this decline is going to happen, if the United States is going to spend and spend and spend, and the Soviet Union can't keep up, at some point they're going to say that's too much and a war is more likely. So the argument goes bipolarity is more stable and you stick with the devil you know. Soviet Union, don't love the Soviet Union, but at least we get how the system works and how do we get this sort of piece out of this. And the key proponents here are going to be the Attorney General, Edwin Meese, who happened to also be Reagan's campaign advisor, whatever they call that. And so a good buddy of Reagan. Attorney General, right? Why is the Attorney General sitting at the table? The answer is buddy of Reagan. And then the new Secretary of State is going to come in, I think, in 1982, and that's Secretary of State George Shultz there. But again, not a lot of people sitting around the table that are the realists. So again, especially early on in the administration, the hardliners are going to sort of win the day. Okay, that's it.